are more ministerial, efficient, and streamlined, and less uncertainty regarding time and outcome. These amended rules are based on criteria established under the Landmarks Law and have been utilized by the Commission over years and even decades, and/or established Commission policies that should now be delegated to staff. They have a number of goals. To amend the current rules to reflect criteria consistently used by the Commission in approving various work types. There is no reason to require a public hearing for an application that we and the applicant know is practically assured of approval. To propose new rules, which are based on the practice and history of the Commission and staff approvals. To reorganize the rules, including consolidating some rules, such as rooftop and rear yard conditions, into one petition section. To make them more readable, intuitive, and user-friendly. To ensure that the rules reflect broader city mandates for energy efficiency, resiliency, and accessibility. To encourage compliance with the law by ensuring that requirements for work are clear and the process is efficient. And finally, to support the agency's designation agenda by assuring transparent and efficient review of applications. Rules are especially important to the success of preservation. By making our regulatory process, which affects only about 5% of the buildings in the city, transparent and efficient, we address the single biggest arguments against designation, the regulatory burden and uncertainty of regulation. Rules are important because they are perceived as transparent and the most efficient form of regulation. I want to touch on some statistics for a minute. Our proposed rules are critical to ensuring that you, commissioners, can continue to fulfill the statutory obligation to review those applications that require your expertise and judgment. But your time is limited. You currently donate approximately 3 days a month to the Commission's work. We cannot reasonably ask you to donate more. Our schedule, by the way, already reflects efforts to address the increase in the number of applications. In the 1990s, we went from one public hearing to one public meeting per month to 2 public hearings and 1 public hearing meeting a month to accommodate the increase in applications. And in the past year, we again modified the schedule, this time making every day a combined hearing and meeting day. This has helped with our calendar, but as we continue to designate more buildings and districts, the number of applications that must be reviewed by you steadily increases. From 1990 to 2015, the number of designated properties increased an average of 13% every 5 years. And this is showing you that growth and the projected growth. During the same 25-year period, the number of applications increased an average of 33% every 5 years. If this trend continues, absent new rules, the Commission will see a significant increase in the number of applications it must review. By 2020, the average number of applications could be just shy of 16,000 per year, which you commissioners would review somewhere between 478 and 956. That's 13 to 27 applications per hearing. In 2025, there could be an average of 20,800 applications per year, which the commissioners will review between 626 and 1,253 applications per year, or 17 to 35 applications per hearing. I note that once we go over 20 applications on a hearing, the calendar is functionally full. And I should also note, none of this also includes public meeting items that are coming back for a second or third review by you. But this future is now. We are already approaching the saturation point. In 2017, you reviewed 573 of the 14,000 applications received by the Commission. That's 4.1%. That was approximately 16 per hearing. If this percentage, however, had been 6% in 2017, which it easily could have been, you would have had to review approximately 840 applications, or 23 applications per year. So we are already over, functionally, that 20 applications per hearing threshold. Thus, rules are critical to ensuring that our calendar remains capable of absorbing an ever-increasing number of applications as the number of designated properties grows. The proposed rules that we'll be discussing fall into 2 broad categories. Criteria for regulating work, such as storefronts, windows, very-free access, and more administrative changes, temporary approvals, permit renewals, and enforcement stuff. Corey's now going to speak to you about the work types and the criteria we're talking about. I will end with a quick review of the more administrative proposals. Thank you very much. Oh, I forgot to do this, I'm sorry. That was showing. Sorry. This again shows you the growth of the items per The applications, that again is the growth of the things coming to you as the commission, and this is the actual number per hearing.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, Commissioners. Corey Harala, First Deputy Director of Preservation. I will be presenting a summary slide on each of the 12 work types listed above, starting with the 7 amended rule sections and ending with 5 new rule sections. This list of sections generally follows the flow of the reorganized rules, which is intended to be more intuitive and logical in terms of arrangement of related work types. The amended and new rule sections use underlying criteria that are the basis for findings of appropriateness and no effect. This includes that the work should be alterations to significant historic pattern should be minimized or avoided, always reversible if possible. The work should be compatible with and not call into attention to itself or detract from the building or the streetscape. For visibility of additions and other installations should generally be non or minimally visible from a public thoroughfare or otherwise not detract from the building or the streetscape. This accounts for contextual factors like height and distance, limited vantage points or extreme angles, and the presence of additions or installations of a similar type. These are fundamental principles that guide the review of most work performed at designated historic buildings. And before moving on, please note that we are not calling out all distinctions between what is allowed for buildings in historic districts and what is allowed for buildings that are individual landmarks, but distinctions do exist and generally are more restrictive for individual landmarks. The first amended section is restoration of building facades. It combines existing sections that include only sandstone restoration and restoration of missing facade features. And greatly expands upon this limited content to become a general section that covers all types of restoration work. The rule includes criteria for the repair, replacement, recreation, replication of facades and facade features, including virtually all materials and some specific treatments, as well as criteria for substitute materials and emergency facade reconstructions. General conditions and requirements for supporting documentation and samples related to the work are also established. And finally, this section is comprehensive. It captures decades of commission practices with regard to reviewing and improving repair and restoration work of all sorts. The next amended section is storefronts and awnings. This rule combines the existing awning section and parts of the existing rule that allows prototype storefronts that are not strictly restorative work. The rule includes criteria for new storefronts and storefront openings, interior partitions behind display windows, awnings, and sidewalk canopies. Examples include operable cafe front type installations in lieu of display windows, fixed or retractable awnings at all buildings, including individual landmarks, and sidewalk canopies at buildings where there is historic precedent for them. The next amended section is signage. The rule includes criteria for bracket signs, lettering in panels and sign bands, window decals, and other related signage. Examples of new signage types include plaques, menu boxes, signage for below-grade storefronts. And the rule will allow for additional illumination options, including halo lighting behind opaque letters and spotlights or concealed lighting at bracket signs. Painted wall signs and billboards are not included in the rule and will require a public hearing. Further, all signage must be as of right per the zoning resolution and the building code. The next amended section is windows and doors. This section relocates and combines the existing window chapters and the new rule, the existing rule for new window openings, and expands upon this to include doors for the first time. The amended rule criteria include criteria for windows, doors, entry infill, not related to storefronts, and add-ons such as storm windows, screens, and films. The rule generally follows the existing criteria for window replacement of primary facades, with exceptions in some cases, such as allowing simple arch-headed windows to be aluminum instead of wood, and allowing simulated double-hung windows like those used for passive house type projects. The criteria for door replacement are generally similar to the criteria for window replacement, in keeping with typical approaches and approvals regularly made by the staff. For new entry infill, historic prototypes can be used for the design of new entrances with doors, side lights, and transit boards, not simply a door. At secondary facades, the rule generally follows existing criteria for window replacement, but allows for more flexibility for window and door configuration and the size of openings. Finally, the categories and types of special windows have been revised and reorganized. and now includes special doors. The next amended section is additions. This combines the existing rooftop additions and rear yard addition rules into one section, excluding rooftop HVAC equipment. The amended rule includes criteria for rooftop additions of occupiable space, such as penthouses, and non-occupiable spaces, such as stairs and elevator bulkheads. Additionally, there are criteria for rear dormers and decks, rear yard additions, including below-grade additions and full-lot commercial additions in the rear yard. The rule allows for minimal visibility of occupiable rooftop additions and rear yard additions over or in conjunction with secondary facades, and minimal visibility of non-occupiable rooftop additions over all facades. Additionally, both rear yard additions and occupiable rooftop additions can be approved at the same time if the height of the existing or new rear yard addition is 2 stories or less, and all other criteria for both additions are met. Finally, for the first time, all rear yard additions must meet certain design criteria for material, fenestration, and treatment of parapets. The next amended section is HVAC and mechanical equipment. Rooftop HVAC is being relocated here, as previously mentioned, from the former rooftop addition section and combined with the existing rooftop addition rule. Mechanical equipment is being defined for the first time in this rule and includes, among other things, modern installations that support sustainability and resiliency measures such as generators, batteries, and solar equipment. Traditionally, the Commission has considered HVAC and mechanical equipment to be building infrastructure that is essentially reversible in nature and subject to change over time due to technological advances and the needs of occupants as necessary components of modern living. The amended rule includes criteria for through wall, through window, and wall-mounted installations, as well as installations in areaways and yards. Finally, the rule allows for minimal visibility of rooftop HVAC and mechanical equipment installations, using the same criteria as previously noted for non-occupiable additions in the additions section. The last amended section is fire escapes. This expands upon the existing rule, which allows for the removal of non-decorative fire escapes in many historic districts, but does not allow the installation of new fire escapes. The amended rule includes criteria for new fire escapes, as well as removal and modification to existing fire escapes. Examples of work include swapping ladder types and extending fire escape landings vertically and horizontally, and installing new fire escapes at the least visible facade as required by the building code. We are now transitioning into entirely new rule sections. All of these sections are intended to codify existing commission and staff criteria and approaches. The first new rule section is excavation. This rule includes criteria for work within the footprint of the building, as well as areaways inside the rear yards. Examples of work include excavating for foundation repairs, and elevator pits, lowering existing cellar floor slabs, and constructing below-grade additions and/or light wells in the rear yard. In most cases, applications will need to include technical reports and drawings, and in general will require a monitoring plan. This is intended to make sure applicants understand the seriousness of the work being proposed in terms of risk, expense, and technical expertise required, and to inform decisions as early in the process as possible. The next new rule section is front, side, and rear yards. This rule includes criteria for work at stoops and stairs, areaways and planting areas, as well as railings, fences, and other related installations. Examples of work include installing handrails on stoops, lowering or enlarging areaways, stairs, and landings, and a variety of other work that is not strictly restorative in nature. The work is based instead on similar changes found in the streetscape and are often intended for practical purposes to address safety, security, and ease of access. This section also addresses walls and fences in general and has separate criteria for garden and historic districts. The next new rule section is barrier-free access. The Commission has regularly supported and approved work to make historic buildings accessible in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and NYC code requirements. The rule includes criteria for ramps and lifts, entrance alterations, and associated hardware like railings and actuators. Examples of work include removing up to 3 steps to bring entrances to grade and adjusting doors and entry infill as required, installing lifts and areaways, and installing exterior ramps with and without handrails at building entrances in front of storefronts and within areaways and yards. In all cases, applications need to consider changes to the interior and other measures that may avoid or lessen any impact on the building and the streetscape. Next new rule section is sidewalks. The Commission recognizes that sidewalks have a complicated regulatory framework and that private building owners are responsible for maintaining them even though they have a public use. This rule includes criteria for stone and concrete paving, cast iron vault lights and diamond plate, and making sidewalks accessible where they interact with the roadway. Examples of work include consolidating sound stone paving and removing crushed pieces for repairs or enlarging tree pits, and covering deteriorated vault lights or replacing vault lights that are already covered and highly deteriorated with diamond plate. Lastly, sidewalk work in districts where sidewalks historically did not feature significant paving or where little or no historic significant paving exists will not require an LPC permit. The last new rule section is health, safety, and utility equipment. The rule includes criteria for miscellaneous objects or equipment installed on facades or in areaways, which are typically required by a governmental agency or utility and have practical purposes for safety and security of the building and its occupants. Examples include utility meters, fire alarm bells, light fixtures, intercoms, security grills, security cameras, and more. This concludes the slides addressing work type sections. Mark will finish the presentation with several slides related to process and illustration.
The current rule allows the staff to approve temporary installations of various types. These are non-renewable approvals. Proposal, the amendment to this section would allow the staff to approve a temporary sign for 180 days instead of 60 days to reflect the fact that these types of signs, for sale signs and things like that, 60 days just isn't enough. And so it would allow that non-renewal approval to be for 180 days. Certificates of no effect. These are an important work type and currently allows staff to approve interior work above the second floor on an expedited basis. Proposed amendment would expand the scope for an expedited approval to interior work below the second full story if there's no commercial use going on. The grant program. We have a small grant program to do restoration work using federal community block grant funds, which must follow federal eligibility criteria for both applicants and projects. Proposed amendments will clarify these eligibility requirements and describe the factors the Commission uses in awarding grants. Chapter 7 is permit duration renewal and revocation. The changes in this chapter reflect the practical realities of performing construction work in today's world. For projects seeking a special permit or variance, it extends the approval by 2 years to account for the time required to go through the ULURP or variance process. The process for renewals is simplified. For example, owners will be able to apply for renewal up until the expiration date instead of 60 days prior to the expiration date. And an applicant can have a DOB permit for a substantial portion of the work instead of all of the work. There's also provision to allow reinstatement for a permit that has accidentally expired, provided the owner applies for reinstatement within 90 days of expiration. This happens on occasion when a project changes hands and the new owner doesn't focus on LPC expiration dates in their permits. This will allow the owner to renew the approval. In addition to other requirements, substantial work must have occurred prior to expiration and the work is ongoing. And finally, administrative enforcement, Chapter 11. These are very technical amendments. The Environmental Control Board no longer exists and it has been subsumed by the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, so the rule needs to reflect that change. For stop work orders issued orally or affixed to the property, rules are being amended to give the LPC 2 working days as opposed to 2 calendar days to mail a copy of that stop work order to the owner. And finally, the penalty schedule, which is a change, is now going to be part of our rules instead of the rules of the ECB or the Office of Administrative Trials. So with that, Commissioners, that finishes our presentation, and we urge you to calendar the rules.
Thanks, Mark, for that's very comprehensive and explaining the scope of the rules initiative. Are there any questions? All right, I think it's pretty clear that there is a strong reason for us to move ahead with this initiative. And I think all of you have participated over time, sort of giving your comments about, oh, why are we doing this? Should this be a rule? And I think over these last several years, our staff has really taken all the suggestions from all of you, as well as seeing repeated approvals by this commission, and again, repeated consensus. So the commission has consistently approving different types of work types, establishing criteria for that, and those are what has been sort of incorporated into the section. And I think just to go back to what Mark and Corey said, that this initiative is sort of, I think, really imperative in terms of this agency and good government. And I think in the long run, it really will support preservation of existing buildings and really allow for this agency to continue to designate new buildings. Not new buildings, old buildings, but in the future. So, any more comments? I'll make a move to calendar the rules initiative. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The rules initiative is now calendared, and we will have a public hearing.
March 27th.
March 27th.
Going to move on to the C of A portion of our agenda, and we're going to start off with item number 2 in the public meeting list, document number 19-4744, application for a certificate of appropriateness in Borough Manhattan, 312 to 322 Canal Street, the Tribeca East Historic District, Borough Manhattan, Block 210, Lot 12, 5 buildings that were constructed in 1825 and 26, and altered in 1851, 1892, and 1962 to 65. The application is to demolish the buildings and construct a new building.
You can zoom in, but not just.
Commissioners and Chinese preservation staff. This application is for 312 to 322 Canal Street. It's located on the south side of the street between Church and Broadway in Tribeca East Historic District. At the public meeting of June 6, 2017, the Commission reviewed the proposal to demolish 5 buildings and construct a 9-story brick building at the site, which is here. The Commissioners had concerns about the scale and monolithic quality of the building and asked the applicants to study certain aspects of the design, including the overall scale, mass, and proportions of the building, the presence of a stair tower at the street wall, the appropriateness of brick, and the large expanse of the glazing at the storefronts. In response to these concerns, the applicant revised the design of the building and has lowered the number of stories from 9 to 7 and moved the core so that it can eliminate the stair tower. Change the fenestration pattern at the facade to better relate to the proportions of windows found within the streetscape. Change the primary material from brick to terracotta with some brick accents to make it less monolithic. And introduce the piers at the base of the building and bulkheads at the storefront and filled with the expanse of the glass. The applicant is here to further walk you through the commission to reopen the proceedings.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christian Jordan, project architect with Paul Petrucci Architect. Thank you for seeing us for this revised proposal for 312 Canal Street. As we have been here before, I am going to move quite quickly through the introductory slides, but please stop me with any questions. And it says this is our site in mid-block on Canal Street. I would point out it's 102 feet wide and quite shallow, between 38 and 45 feet deep, meaning that there's not a lot of depth in the site to hide massing setbacks. Quickly overview of the previous conditions. The buildings were built in 1825, have been renovated several times, up to 4 stories in the 1890s and the 60s, back down to 2 stories. It's currently a 2-story building, which we're proposing to be demolished and replaced with a new building. And thinking of contextuality, one of the first things we start with the scale. We of course want to match the scale within the individual location and streetscape, but we also in this case want to look at the scale within the larger district. And so we've mapped out the building heights within the district, sort of blue and purple cool colors are short buildings, 30, 40, 50 feet. The orange and red are the tall ones, so 130 and above. And what we found is the sort of predominant case is this green, which is 70 to 85 feet in the district. And in our revised proposal, which is shorter than before, the entirety of our building is within that predominant scale of 73 feet street wall, 85 feet setback, very much contextual for the district. We also, and thinking about contextuality, want to study the architectural history of the site and the district, and we found that Canal Street is unique, and a unique position in that it's sort of a transition zone and in a borders the Soho district to the north with its proud cast iron tradition, and is the sort of northernmost border of the Tribeca district, equally proud architectural tradition, sort of palatial commercial buildings, a wide variety of styles, including cast iron, Second Empire. And then Canal Street itself, this historical thoroughfare, having a great range of styles and scales, and our site itself being very much rooted in sort of utilitarian and more modest architectural style with a lot of brick masonry is also something we want to speak to. And walking the district, we did want to try and identify buildings that had, like ours, sort of a larger, wider street front, and found that actually the cast iron typology is a really successful way of dealing with that. 67 Franklin is an individual landmark right on the edge of our district, very wide. I think this facade is about 150 feet wide. It's quite massive, 6 stories. And the lessons we're drawing from this are, sort of breaking down the mass of each floor with a striking sill line, sort of differentiation among floors, starting very tall storefront, tall second floor, slightly shorter but still well proportioned middle floors, and then whenever there's a 6th floor, it would tend to be a bit shorter. Also, of course, the sort of rhythm and repetition across the facade, and cast iron tend to be somewhat delicate, and in that delicacy, emphasized by the depth of the facade. Again, some more, and we did see that sort of larger buildings throughout the district using that strategy successfully. Here, I just again want to highlight these 2 masonry buildings within the district. 349 is our neighbor. It's just a material that especially it's throughout the district, but especially on our site, we really consciously want to sort of tap into that and ground our building in that sort of the warmth, the craftsmanship of brick or masonry. Also looked at some modern precedents. Starting on the left, 6-story building at the street front with 7th floor setback. Very simply composed building. The sort of beauty to me is the use of terracotta to bring warmth, and also light and shadow with the profiles. Moving along to sort of the Soho district, 6-story building. Seems to be playing with the cast iron typology, using quite a bit of terracotta in that facade. 40 Chicrawdy, also a 6-story building. Stainless steel and the cast iron typology, and then 40 Bond Street with this sort of really familiar proportions and rhythms and a surprising material, modern material. Here's our site. This is us. Again, this block is defined by this sort of hodgepodge character up and down, different styles, different materials, quite a bit of brick masonry. A previous proposal on the bottom here. As Ann said, just quickly recap, the major comments was that the building is just too large for the site, wanting to articulate the massing more and move the stair tower and work on the storefront. Here's our first view of the new proposal. We'll go through all these points in more detail as we see the renderings. But I think right off the top here, the big thing you can see, we dropped the building 2 stories. And so that the street wall is 6 stories, shorter than its neighbor. I think it's the 4th tallest building on the block. Now, there was a slight zoning change in the last few years. Even though we have a shallow lot, it allowed us just enough flexibility to move this stair and elevator tower back off the street wall. And we'll go through some of the other points as we move through the renderings. Here's a slide just sort of, again, highlighting the brick masonry that we're seeing on our side of the street and the other side of the street. Putting a point from this idea, so we're showing that we are, contextually, height is contextual, but also our area in this stretch is, not the largest area building, by any stretch, but the 3rd largest. Here is a diagrammatic massing of our site. Again, it's quite a shallow, sort of irregular lot. First floor will be commercial, built full out. Stack floors 2 through 6 will be sort of a typical residential stacking with small rear setback, and then a voluntary setback at the 7th floor to sort of keep that street wall. That will also be residential on the 7th floor. So to, again, highlight the size comparison. This sort of dark line up here was our previous submittal. Here's our street wall now. As I alluded to in sort of a precedent study, we did want to work with the cast iron typology, but it worked well for a large building and breaking down the massing. And so the lessons we learned there was, of course, using the sort of the sill lines of the strike line all the way through the site, break up the floors, creating a differentiation, especially at the base, by doubling up the window pattern here, and then again at the storefront. The use of rhythm throughout the facade, the sort of more delicate members. Again, some more differentiation. The column gets it's a double column here, turns to a triple column at the 2nd floor. And finally, depth. So the renderings, we really pushed the depth of this building. We're 15 inches from the glass to the front of the terracotta. And we have 2 layers of depth. Much like a cast iron building, we'll have multiple layers of depth for light and shadow. We have this other interstitial layer of panel, which is 10 inches back from the front face. Working with that cast iron, we, as it sort of built up to, we did want to express and relate to the masonry history of the site. And so terracotta is a natural choice for that because we can detail these sort of very slender members that allow us to get this expression of cast iron, but bring in the masonry quality. This is the sort of a custom terracotta color that we're proposing. It is being sampled in Germany now. One thing you pick up from brick that we want to draw from is a variation within a brick or masonry panel, but also between them. And so we have this sample here, but this is sort of the glaze that we'll put on it. You'll see some lowlights and highlights. So within each panel, you're going to get some variation. But we also want to create, much like a masonry building, variation between panels. So we're selected a middle tone, and we're having them sample a slightly lighter and slightly darker tone. So across this larger building, you'll just get this very sort of small texture variations that give the building life. And those changes will happen in sort of 4 and 6 foot intervals of these panels, in between which is a very small 8-inch epoxy color match joint. The results of that, you can see now in these renderings, this is the existing condition, looking for Mercer. Our previous proposal quite large. Something is wrong with the aspect ratio here, I think. That's just my perspective. Okay, sorry. So, I should say. And our current proposal, again, highlight sort of differentiation of the base and the upper floors, this quality of depth and rhythm. But also highlight that our storefront and each floor has been heightened considerably to sort of match the historic proportions. Previously proposed storefront was sort of a very modern edge-to-edge glass condition. Current proposal, taller, also broken up into 3 parts by terracotta columns, and then within each bay, sort of more articulation with the aluminum frame itself.
So piers and the facade of the ground floor are set in significantly from the rest of the building?
Not significantly. So they are set in a little bit. So what's happening here is this sort of cornice line is projecting more than the sills on the upper floors. And then this is about the face of this is about 10 inches pushed in from the face of this. Previous elevation, again, we're quite a bit taller than our surroundings, up to 100 feet stair tower, bringing down our street wall to the actual floor is 73 feet, the parapet is 76.6, and then our setback. Here's a view we didn't have in our previous presentation. We included here a couple things I would highlight. It just really fits well within this line of cornices. If you look closely, you can begin to see the sort of subtle variation amongst panels that we're proposing. Here we're around the corner on Broadway, looking over Lisbonard Street, our previous proposal, which was taller, you can see just the top of the bulkhead. Now you can no longer see that. Here's a sightline diagram. Just quickly want to move through some of these components in detail. Zooming in at the storefront level. Each bay is about 30 feet wide. It's framed with these sort of triple terracotta columns, and then infilled with aluminum and glass. And the glass, as opposed to before, is sort of a more robust articulation. We have double columns at where we have a column, and we have sort of a 6-inch depth from the glass to the front of that. Our residential entry, we've pushed down our door 2 feet. It's 8 feet door here. Also introduced this sort of custom dog's tooth terracotta panel above to demarcate that entry. Moving up the building to sort of typical second floor, which is the double window bay. So we want to highlight here what one of those columns looks like. They're sort of composed of these 3 slender terracotta pieces that are 3 inches wide, 15 inches depth to the face of the glass, and then between them is a panel, and there's 10-inch depth from the face of this panel. Here is that sort of larger sill / cornice that at the lower floor is 2'3" out. At the typical floors, it's 15 inches out. Here we are at the typical floors, 3, 4, and 5. We're getting into this more standard single window pattern. We're also changing from the 3-column type to the 2-column type. Here's our typical sill. Sort of more slender column at the typical floor.
What's the infill around that?
Where? Here?
In the elevation, yes.
This terracotta.
Okay.
And that would be resident.
It's got horizontal lines on the elevations that was scored, or
Yeah, it's a
pattern.
these are not individual pieces per se, it's just stored within the panels. It's like reading there. The top floor is detailed very similar to the lower floors. We did want to differentiate it a bit, so we've introduced this screen at the bottom, sort of shortens visually the windows to see the 6th floor of the building. And are also called the larger 3-foot terracotta floors. Here are just some blown up or zoomed in sections, just to give an idea of the scales. Our storefront, 17 feet for the floor, 50 feet glass, 12-foot second floor, typical floor is 11 feet, top floor with the screen. Moving through the plans to the first floor, primarily commercial, with a residential lobby and egress. Then we'll stack up typical floors 2 through 6, residential with a small setback in the rear. And finally, at the top floor, 7th floor, also residential with a sort of 7-foot setback at the street wall. So that concludes my presentation. I thank the Commission for hearing the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Side wall that faces east is all 100% terracotta.
Yes, this is, above this building, 100% terracotta.
Yes, ma'am.
You have a sample of the terracotta and what the glaze is going to look like?
We don't have the current sample, we have examples of, this is being sampled in Germany now. For this color. This is the finish, matte finish, and that's the glaze without the variation.
The color's going to be this kind of tomato-y, rosy color.
Yes, that's what we're having sampled now.
Okay, are there any other questions? Any other questions? All right, I just want to know for the record that we did receive, I believe, 2 emails still opposing the project. One from the board, the co-operative board, which is Lisbonard, so they well, and as you know, when sometimes when we have applications which receive a lot of testimony, when it comes back to us, we make sure that it's posted about a week in advance to allow people to submit written testimony. So that's what we see. questions, we can, thank you, we can close the hearing. Okay, comments? Yes.
One of the examples that was used as a reference for this is the number 10 Bond Street building. And I am continually, the Bond Street building, because of the finish on the terracotta, it's very highly glazed, and it is completely dissonant from the other buildings on that lot. Visually, it's really obtrusive. And as you know, masonry buildings and cast iron buildings were painted a semi-gloss or matte to replicate stone. The actual stone buildings are matte as well. I'm a bit troubled by the highly reflective nature of the glaze on some of this terracotta, and I wouldn't be able to approve that.
I would agree with that, but let me amplify my thoughts. I think there are two building typologies that contemporary architects continue to mine, if you will, for inspiration in our city. One is cast iron, and the other are just traditional brownstones or row houses. And I think all through the city, in and outside of historic districts, there's a really rich contemporary vocabulary that's been developed, often individual responses to those seemingly highly restricted creative choices. But this, in the hands of creative architects, I think it shows what an unlimited array of opportunities that exist. So we have another win here, and I think it's a very nice presentation. Thank you for such a complete presentation. I think there are all sorts of little minor things that I might suggest as a designer myself, but I'm not saying any of them because I think in the hands of this architect, they're very well and created in a vocabulary that they can study, and I respect that. I have no particular comments that make it inappropriate. I think it's a very, very nice job, very interesting job, and urbanistically, I know that the co-op behind will lose some windows, or views at least, that they've had for a long time. It's always troubling. This is part of life in the city, I guess. This is a completely legal building to build. I faced years ago in two buildings I designed on Houston Street in a similar, very thin situation, all approved by this commission 20 years ago. I know how difficult it is to build such a thin building, and I'm very intrigued by the tiny size of the apartments. I congratulate you. They're not sprawling units, but they're affordable, presumably, more or less. Anyway, well, too much words, but I think this is a very nice presentation. I congratulate you on it. I do think I can support the color. I think once we see the final color that you're proposing, we haven't seen that yet, only in renderings. But I think the glaze is wrong for the same reasons that were just.
I just want to add to what said. This site is actually, it is very difficult to mask and to create floor plates and be efficient and also address issues of core and two means of egress. And I remember when we saw it the first time around, I think all of us responded or reacted similarly, which was it was much larger than context really could bear, and it had the core at the front, which may have been from a floor plate standpoint efficient, but it really created an issue in terms of finding sort of dead wall and taller right at the front facade. And we had asked them to look at two, amongst other comments about really bringing this to scale and relocating that core. And I think those two changes have made for a much better massing on the site that in my opinion, fits much more comfortably and really directly relates to our comments. They managed to push the core back, which has, I think, really is a significant improvement to the facade and to the views that you get along, I think this is Mercer Street. So that was, I think, really did improve the proposal, and bringing the street wall to a point which is actually very similar to existing street walls along Canal Street. Just on the issue of material and terracotta, I'm told that terracotta, I always think of terracotta more decorative sort of installations, but terracotta does work. It draws from materials within the district. But I think the glazing is a mistake, and I think you want something more texture, softer, and I think that's really a matter of refining the proposal. There are other areas that I think they could continue to refine, and I just want to talk about the penthouse, which, it's seeing it is fine, but I think it would be helpful to just proceed further, and some other commissioners think that. I think very easily they can just reduce the penthouse height by a couple of feet, and what they work for, they can reduce some of its visibility on the front facade, and I think it just fit much more comfortably in those streets. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with your comments and what other people have been saying. I think the street really is not one where you see a lot of visible rooftop accretions that are meant to blend with the front facade. They're meant to kind of disappear and see and not have kind of architectural treatment. So I think that the applicants work with the staff to look at using alternate materials that would make it a little bit less prominent and visible. It's important to remember that this penthouse is only 8 feet set back, and the building itself is tiny, but I mean, this is not set back very far, and the renderings have shown that. I think it'd be good when, as there's about getting the standards made, that the staff look at it to make sure that that the color works too, in addition to the texture. I think that the idea of a reddish building is fine. I think the idea of a kind of brightly colored building on this block is fine. But I think that the staff should look at it and make sure that it doesn't seem neon or things that work weird, but that it just seems to fit that.
Yes, Diane.
I agree with the comments of the commissioners, and I do think that that's definitely really improved on the last situation. Because looking shorter in line with the buildings in the district, as far as the street wall, the work on the storefronts, depth, and bring the piers down, all of that. And also, I think the color and the terracotta in general are a good idea, but addressing the concerns of the gloss and also the exact color that we see. And it doesn't bother me as much, the upper section, but I think perhaps it can be improved by making it even more to recede, because you've got a taller building than that, like that. So I could blend into that more or less. I do think it's been the fenestration, I think everything has been improved on it, and it's much more appropriate at this point.
Other comments?
Yes, I also, I want to thank you because I really feel like you listened to all of the comments, and it's striking how the character of the building fits so much better into the scale of the street in terms of the ribbon on the buildings and the height, and it's quite attractive, and I agree about the interesting use of materials. I would like to echo the sentiments about not only the glazing problem with it's having a little bit of presence, but I don't think after all of your hard work to make it fit that you want it to stick out this way. Yes.
One more comment about terracotta. If the applicant doesn't know this building and would like to understand what I think I've always read is the first use of terracotta in an American building. That may be a stretch, but anyway, very early is the originally the Long Island Historical Society, now called the Brooklyn Historical Society, at the corner of Pierpont and Clinton. Beautiful terracotta integrated with the brick building, and it's pretty orangey. It's pretty nice.
Any other comments? All right, so, I think we can go ahead with, approval. I think we can, just include that the work and stuff, and I think the commissioners all feel like the glazing should go or be reduced to extent that, and the color to be a little muted, and they can also just, continue to reduce the visibility of it.
Okay, so now testing my ability to do oral reading at length for the third hearing in a row. I will now attempt to read this. Okay, in the matter of 312-322 Canal Street in Tribeca East Historic District, the application is to demolish the buildings and to construct a new building. I note that the 5 buildings were originally constructed as 2.5-story dwellings in 1825 to 1826, altered in the mid and late 1800s, and were redesigned by Abraham L. Seiden as 2-story commercial buildings in 1962 to 65. I also note that the south side of Canal Street between Church Street and Broadway is characterized by a streetscape featuring predominantly mid to late 19th century Italianate, neo-Gothic, and Queen Anne style narrow store and loft buildings, ranging from 3 to 6 stories. A late 19th century 8-story Renaissance Revival office building, an early 20th century modern style 2-story bank building at the east corner, and a late 20th century 2-story concrete block commercial building at the west corner, and that the buildings are generally masonry construction, including stone and brick, and the majority of the buildings also feature cast iron elements. I recommend approval, noting that the existing buildings were completely altered prior to designation of the historic district and no longer reflect their 19th century appearance. Therefore, their demolition will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the historic district. That the proposed building's height and massing will be consistent with the height and massing at historic store and loft buildings throughout the historic district and harmonious with the range of sizes of buildings within the Canal Street streetscape. That the plane of the proposed street facades will align with the facades of adjacent properties, thereby reinforcing the street wall, a significant consistent feature of the historic district. That the floor-to-ceiling heights will approximate the scale of neighboring properties, thereby helping to maintain a harmonious relationship with the neighboring buildings. That the details of the design, including the terracotta panels and piers, repeating at varying depths, will recall in a contemporary manner the ornamentation and materials and detailing of historic buildings in the historic district. That prominent aspects of the design, which will be perceived within the context of the streetscape, including the modular organization of the facades, the proportional relationship of solid to void, the depth of the infill and the materials palette will be consistent with such elements as buildings throughout the streetscape, thereby helping this building to be well integrated with the surrounding context. That the fenestration pattern, moving from larger openings to smaller at the top, help to create a sense of verticality in this building, and will be consistent with typical organization of facade elements at tall, narrow, loft buildings within the historic district. That the terracotta and brick materials will relate well to materials found at buildings throughout the historic district. That the masonry at the ground floor of the building, including the terracotta piers and decorative dog-tooth brick work, will help reinforce the solidity of the building base, a unifying characteristic of buildings throughout the district. That the presence of shop fronts at the base of the building will be consistent with commercial establishments found at the bases of buildings throughout the streetscape and historic district. That the ground floor infill featuring display windows, transoms, doors, and bulkheads will be in keeping with the proportions found and infill at the base of buildings throughout the historic district. That the penthouse and bulkheads will be set back from the front facade of the building and seen against the background of taller secondary facades of neighboring buildings, and will feature simple massing forms, uniform facade treatments, and simpler detailing than the street facade, which will help these rooftop elements to remain a secondary presence at the building and within streetscape views. That the view and lot line facades will be in keeping with the secondary facades at buildings of this size throughout the district in terms of basic organization, finish, and simple detailing. And that the proposed excavation will be designed and built in compliance with Department of Building regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the building and the adjacent buildings. I also note that the applicant will work with the staff to refine the color of the terracotta, to perhaps eliminate the glazing of the terracotta, and work with the staff to reduce the visibility of the penthouse.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Applications approved.
Yeah, okay. Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, docket number 1917464. This is 633 West 115th Street, located in the Morningside Heights Historic District. It's a colonial revival style row house designed by Henry O. Chapman and built in 1892-93. The application is to construct a rooftop bulkhead and a rear yard addition to excavate the areaway and modify the facade and stoop. This was read into the record on the public hearing of January 16th, 2018. It's being presented today for the first time.
Okay, I just want to this was read into the record, so we're just reopening to have a public hearing.
Good morning, Commissioners. Edith Bellinghausen, Preservation staff. The subject property is located on West 115th Street on the north side between Broadway and Riverside Drive. This is in the Morningside Heights Historic District. This is the building here. The Commissioners will note the existing conditions on the block, consisting primarily of large apartment buildings, and that the Morningside Heights Historic District is characterized by these larger residential buildings. The proposal before you today is in several parts. It's to modify the front entrance to allow for barrier-free access, remove a section of the facade at a below-grade areaway to construct an egress stair, constructing a rooftop stair and elevator bulkhead. This bulkhead will not be visible from the street, and also to demolish the rear facade for the construction of a full-height rear addition, which also includes a full-lot rear yard extension. And this work will be partially visible through a small sight line from West 116th Street to the north. The item as originally advertised also included window replacement at the primary West 115th Street facade, which has been revised for staff level review. And lastly, the Commissioners will note that the Department of Buildings approved this proposed work prior to designation, and that certain DOB permits have been issued, but not all. The applicants are here to further discuss this project and to answer any questions.
Thank you, Edith.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Honorable Commissioners, LPC staff, and esteemed public. Let me introduce myself and my partners. I am Taras Hankevich. I represent the Korean Methodist Church and Institute as a member of its Building Construction Committee. With me today are Brian Jug, architect and project manager from Beatty Harvey at Coco Architects, Luliano Ovalis, project manager from the Metropolis Group, our expediter, Gary Voskresensky, Esquire, legal counsel for KMCI. The Korean Methodist Church and Institute was founded in 1921 as a member of the United Methodist Church in response to political and religious activism surrounding the March 1st, 1919 protests of Korean occupation by Japan. Christian patriots exiled in the United States formed the first Korean church in the Northeast. In 1924, they purchased their first building for their home at 459 West 21st Street, a building that now is landmarked as well. In 1927, they purchased 633 West 115th Street for $35,000 as their new home for their church and have held regular services there since up until September 2015 when they turned the building over to their contractor for building their new church. Our goal was to celebrate their 90th anniversary at this location in their new sanctuary. With a 365-day build schedule, this seemed easily achieved. In this building, many historical events occurred, not just for the congregation of the Korean Methodist Church and Institute, but for the democratic nation of South Korea. At this location, the future president of a free democratic government prayed in the 30s and 40s. A government in exile was formed, and the piano on which the national anthem was composed was housed here, and on which countless concerts, recitals, and practices were played. The piano in storage awaits its return to its home. In 1979, the church formed its first building committee and started fundraising for a future new church. And by 2008, they had saved enough to start the process and hired Beatty Harvey Coco to design the new church for this location. By 2013, with approval from the Community Board 9, the plans for construction were filed and the DOB approval process was started. By 2014, with plans approved by DOB, the church was ready to pull the project out to bid. In August of 2015, they signed a contract with a general contractor, vacated the building, stored their belongings, found a space for Sunday worship, and turned the building over in September of 2015. The church signed a short-term lease with the Broadway Presbyterian Church on Broadway and West 14th Street, and now only holds Sunday services in the afternoon, a departure from their daily religious services and community services provided in their own building for generations. The contractor who had us built set upon the project and started work immediately. First, the asbestos abatement, which brought about the removal of most windows and stripping of the roofing material. Then the interior demolition was conducted. By January of 2016, the building was an empty shell, missing its windows, and the debris chute cut through all the floors where previously there were classrooms, offices, and a nursery. The next step was to shore the front facade, as our plan included the retention of it for both aesthetic and historical reasons. The Korean culture has a great emphasis on respect for ancestors, age, and seniority, and as such, the retention of the front facade was an easy choice in design due to the history and personage that have passed through its doors. The contractor filed for his permit, DOB issued the work permit in February of 2016, and the work was completed quickly. The contractor was ready to proceed with the full demolition of the building, excluding facade. Since putting the construction of the building out to bid in 2014, the church had started negotiations with the owner of the adjacent properties for an access agreement. Unfortunately, this process took longer than anyone expected. Our progress that had a great start had come to a halt. As our contractor would not be able to proceed with demolition without an access agreement, DOB was not able, we had to wait for it. DOB did issue a full demolition work permit for us on 5/24/2017 during our waiting period. The negotiations took until August 16th of 2017. When the party signed a nearly 100-page, 365-day access agreement that included a substantial license fee. Our contractor mobilized, applied for additional permits, installed scaffolding, set the schedule, and started demolition. On September 26 of 2017, notification from Landmark Preservation Commission halted our project again. Our building, with approved plans, vacant with no interior or windows, was designated part of the Morningside Heights Historical District, and we could no longer proceed without your approval. 4 months later, at a cost of approximately $7,000 a week, with insurance, rental space for services at the Broadway Presbyterian Church, rental fees for scaffolding and equipment on site, design costs, legal fees, and a quickly approaching deadline on our access agreement, we stand before you. Working with your staff, presenting our project to the community board again, gaining unanimous support for it, we present our project for your approval for a certificate of appropriateness. Our design team worked tirelessly with direction of LPC staff to adjust our project to bring it in line with what we expect should meet your approval. Built in 1892-93, the building has seen much and has suffered much. Years of repair and modernization left the building tired. The last 2 years of water damage from the elements with exposed windows openings and an unsecured roof did her in. It's taken us nearly 40 years to reach the point with our project. Please help us to continue to build so that we can serve the local community and continue our proud history while meeting the needs of the future generations. At this time, I'll turn over to Brian Jugg, our architect, to present the items on hand. Thank you.
Hello. So the existing building, as was demolished, it has about 4 floors plus a roof. Our new building, our new installation has 3 floors plus a mezzanine. Does have a, yes, no. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It has 3 floors plus a mezzanine and a roof bulkhead on the roof. This is show the existing building section on the left, the new section on the right where the bulkhead is on the top. The new addition on the first floor, ground floor, is here with the 1.5 story space. This is to show the bulkhead with a mock-up. It shows that it's pushed back about 8 foot, 10 foot, I think. So the view from the street, you cannot see it. The existing facade is to remain. We're replacing windows as mentioned. The door is being, for ADA access, we need to bring the floor down 2 feet to meet grade. So now we're going to be installing a new wood frame, custom wood door and surround with existing fan light and side lights too. Those are all existing to remain. This shows the rear extension with the panel system, cement panel system with new windows. The other side, this is the west side. This is to show the existing conditions right now. And the new the new building will have the same cement panels wrapping around on the backside. This is a shot from the 116th Street. This is to show the areaway, how we have to excavate about 2 feet down in order to get the stair to work properly for code requirements. And we're bringing the door down 2 feet to bring it up. Some window and door details, just to show what we're doing. And this is the existing door as is right now, and the existing fan light. It'll be restored and reinstalled. It's a new wood surround with a wood door, and just to note, we're going to be replacing there's a sign for the Korean Methodist Church. We're going to be placing it right up above the door as well. So this fan light is existing. We're just going to reinstall it along with the 2 side lights here. And that's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions? Are there any speakers on this item? No speakers, and Community Board 9 recommends approval, to support the proposal. And if we have no other questions, we can, do you have any questions? Okay, all right, we can close the hearing. But I think that, that the change, I'm sympathetic to sort of the set of circumstances that have brought them here before us. But I think if you look at the scope of work that they proposed, I think all of it is things that I think the commission can find approvable. It's really mostly at the rear of the building, and we're talking about the full lot coverage at the ground floor for the sanctuary. And I think the commission has historically always been supportive of religious institutions and their need in the rear yard. But also, if you look at the rear yard context, there's several buildings that are much deeper. And in terms of the visibility of the changes at the rear, it's a very limited view, which is through an alleyway. So I think that is well within what we have typically found approvable or appropriate. And in terms of the bulkheads at the top, they're not visible. And I think the changes in the front, including, it's very nice actually that they're restoring this door, which is very important to them. But overall, I think it supports the mission of this church, who's been there for many, many decades, and sort of adds to, I think, the history of the neighborhood. Okay, are there any other comments? Yes?
I agree, and I know the block very, very well. I used to live right next door to this building for like 3 years, and I can attest that the courtyard is quite jumbled. It is not a classic donut by any stretch of the imagination, and I think that would be the only basis where we would have concerns in other cases, and since that is the case here, I think it's fine. And I also can say, many tough, cold winter days experience, the steepness of the street does mandate the kind of solution that they're doing with the stoop. I think it's totally appropriate, and gotta feel bad for the process they've gone through. I'm glad we're not gonna make it any worse than it needs to be.
Okay, with that, we'll, yes, go ahead, Jeannie, when you get into the record.
In the matter of docket 19-17-464, 633 West 115th Street, Morningside Heights Historic District, a colonial revival style row house designed by Henry O. Chapman and built in 1892-93. The application is to construct a rooftop bulkhead and a rear yard addition, excavate the areaway, and modify the facade and stoop. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Morningside Heights Historic District. I also note that the Department of Buildings approvals for the proposed work were granted prior to designation, and that permits for a portion of the approved work were issued by DOB shortly after the district was designated. However, permits for exterior components of the work were not issued. I recommend approval finding that the excavation at the areaway light well, related facade alterations at the basement, and installation of the new egress stairs will not damage or eliminate significant architectural features. That the work at the areaway will occur substantially below sidewalk grade and will be partially obscured from view by the area gate and fence. That the restoration of the existing wrought iron posts at the stoop and areaway fence will preserve this significant feature. That the alterations at the front entrance will allow for barrier-free access with minimal impact on significant historic features of the building. That the proposed entrance infill featuring a paneled wood door, side lights, spandrel, and transom will closely match the materials, details, design, and proportions of the historic infill. that replicating the historic details at the transom and restoring the leaded glass fan light will preserve the significant feature of the entrance, that the construction of the proposed rooftop bulkhead and rear yard addition will not eliminate or detract from the significant architectural features of the building, that the proposed bulkhead will be set back from the west 105th Street facade and will not be visible over the primary facade, that the presence of existing rear yard incursions and larger buildings on this block have eliminated a cohesive central green space, and therefore the proposed rear yard addition will not diminish a central green space, that the simple form and massing of the addition will not significantly alter the scale of the building, that only a portion of the rear yard addition and rear facade will be visible through a gap in the street wall at the west 116th Street and will be viewed in conjunction with secondary facades of large apartment buildings and other rear yard incursions, that the fenestration at the upper floors of the rear yard facade will relate to the original floor plates, that the neutral finish of the proposed fiber cement cladding at the rear facade in addition will help to blend in with its surroundings, and that the proposed work will not diminish the special character of the building or the Morningside Heights Historic District.
All in favor? Any opposed? This application is approved.
Commissioners, the next item is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 19-15103. This is 449 Convent Avenue, located in the Hamilton Heights Sugar Hill Historic District Extension. This is a vacant lot, formerly the site of a Renaissance Revival-style row house designed by John E. Sharsmith and built in 1896 to 97, and demolished by the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development in 2011 after an emergency declaration of unsafe conditions. This application is to construct a new building.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. James Rusiello, Preservation Staff. 449 Convent Avenue is at the southwest corner of Hamilton Heights Sugar Hill Historic District Extension, located at the east side of Convent Avenue between West 149th and West 150th Streets, and is presently a vacant lot. At designation, the lot was a 4-story Renaissance Revival row house, a bookend in a row of 6 row houses at the southeast corner of Convent and 150th. It was demolished in 2011 following a serious fire and failure of the owner to make repairs, leading to the issuance of an immediate emergency declaration, resulting in the house being demolished. The application is to approve the construction of a new building rising 4 stories with visible 5th-story penthouse and a visible rooftop bulkhead with occupiable space. The architect, Parag Mehta, is here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. James. Are those slides getting repeated? This one, right? Yeah. Okay. So here is the small key plan and the site that indicates the vacant lot that's next to the big apartment building, and 5 brownstone which are in line, 1 missing. That's when it's viewed from the corner, we see an open lot with, again, apartment building and the other existing brownstones. viewed from a different corner. That's a view from the back. Like I would say that it's, you really have to be in one of the backyard to see this. If any of the public streets, you really won't be able to see any of this. Here is the building that we're proposing. The front elevation to the left, we are trying our effort best to match the building the way it existed in its time in terms of proportions, windows, material. We have some samples of brick here which we try to match with the adjoining building that we could look at it later, maybe. Yeah. To the rear, we have a facade that goes, again, on the front, we have a setback floor, which is set back 14, 15 feet from the front. Rear, it's a simple brick facade with 3 windows. That's a side view of the building that shows the setback stair core and a sloped bulkhead with no visibility from the sidewalk. Section through the building. So some details which are pretty standard to all the historical building. We're trying our best to match with the windows and door profiles. Here is the rendered image. The building sits on the lot line. It sits right on the property line. It's the corner building which is dark. Next to it is a small side yard between the building and the other building, non-historical apartment building. Same picture with our building put in place. Viewing from this side, the way the massing works, we really don't see any of the floor above or bulkhead. Going back to this side, the rear, the fifth floor extension is actually pushed back from the other building. So the building is 10 feet away from the property line. Our pushback is 15 feet. That's our zoning sheet. Everything is obviously as of right. Here is the plan. It's going to be a 2-family building. This drawing is specifically added to show the hardship of building, because when these buildings were built, they were built with a shared party wall. Now we have to create a separate bearing wall, 3-hour bearing wall on one side with a seismic gap. On the other side, we are required to keep again 2 inch of seismic gap, and we have CMU wall. At this point, we are trying to bring in on this facade. It has to be some kind of finished material. So we are trying to bring in a EFIS material that would look like stucco. The reason we're trying to choose EFIS is there's no way to make this building green in terms of insulation. If we can get outside insulation, the building performs probably much better. And this shows all the dimension that we're working with, so there's really no space left for anything. Selection of material. Again, the materials that we are trying to use in terms of brick and all that, we washed neighborhood building, tried to match the brick. We have brick samples, we have EFIS sample. In the same historical area, but different historical district, 751 was a proposed, again, a new building in a landmark district, which is in like 2-block radius from the building. Yeah, I guess that's the last slide.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions? Yes, Fred.
I'm looking for the lot plan. I guess I'm looking at page 3. There.
This one? Yeah.
Yeah, there. Is, what I'm trying to assess is the intrusion into the donut. And is your site all the way back to that 18-foot line? Is that your site? In other words, your site is much deeper than the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other townhouses?
Yeah, it is.
So
Right, property lines is
that's what I
33
mean,
feet,
property
yeah.
line, yeah. So the property line is different for this site, even though the building that was burned was similar to the others.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's 83.
So you have a rear yard? You have many dimensions on there, but not that. Is that a 30-foot rear yard?
30-foot rear yard.
That's 30 feet. Thank you.
30 feet, 1 inch. 30, no, it's actually, is it 30 feet or is it 29?
It should be 30 feet.
Okay.
1 inch off? Yeah, 1 inch off, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to adjust that. Okay, other questions? Yes, Diana?
Yeah, the front facade, the top floor in your new proposal, it's very different from other buildings on the street because it looks like there's no top lintel, that it's under the cornice or something. It's a little odd. The other windows, as far as the general shape and so forth, look reasonable, but seems like there's no top to those windows. I guess it's a comment, it's sort of a question. Is there a top behind the cornice, or is it just
I think we are really mimicking the shape from the neighbor building. So on the top floor, the question is that this line right here, right? We are really aligning with the neighbor.
There's no, okay, thank you.
Commissioners, I'd also point out that this is a bookended building, so this has 3 openings down the facade. The other buildings in the middle of the block appear to have 2, or do have 2, but the one at the end has 3. So it's sort of a mirror image on the other end. Yeah.
Oh, in the original.
Yes.
That's the old building. This is the building that was demolished.
That doesn't bother me as much. It's, I don't mind, it's the edge. I mean, it's.
Any other questions? Okay, we have one speaker, Patrick Wilder.
Good morning, Commissioners. Patrick Waldo, Historic Districts Council. This building defers to its historic neighbors and doesn't compete with them, but rather takes all of its design cues from them. Since this building identifies as a background building replicating a historic condition, we would like to see some of these details refined. These include configuring the top story's windows so that they do not sit within the cornice, but rather below it, and providing details about the cornice's profile and design. Further, this building's side elevation faces an alley, rendering it completely visible. Taking this public view into consideration, this elevation could be designed in some way other than cladding it completely in ephes. This is a substandard construction material for a historic district, and we are not confident about its longevity. This large wall of ephes will be a barren detraction to the streetscape. Given that this will be a residential building with several units, the return on the investment should definitely grant a higher quality material than what has been proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? All right. Community Board 9 does not support the design, and they made some comments. They said the additional floor is out of context with the adjacent buildings. Windows and shores should match the aesthetic of the adjacent buildings. An open side of the building is bare and could incorporate more windows. Okay. Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Okay. In that case, we can close the hearing. So just one of the comments.
Thank you.
I think, yes.
No, I said thank you.
No, that's okay, thank you. So, I think sometimes the commission sort of struggles with new buildings when the detailing and finesse isn't quite there as yet. But I just want to say sort of a few broader remarks, and I think that has to do with just the massing. It's an infill building, its street wall matches, and the idea of having sort of a 3-window configuration, I think, draws very much from what was there historically. I know one of the comments that we received had to do with the 5th floor and the visibility of that. And I think that, I looked at their plans, and it seems that it's 2 units. They have a double height space at the back on a certain floor, and it seems to me they could recapture that double height space and put their master bedroom there and really just do a 3-story building and eliminate the 5th floor, or at least push it back sufficiently so that it has much less visibility from the side street. I think the row otherwise is, I think it's a missed opportunity really to try and get the scale back to what was there before. So I know that I'm sure all commissioners have comments about the massing itself, but also the design features and details. So let me just open it up to all of you. Comments? Yes, Michael.
I agree with the Historic District Council in terms of the ephes on the side wall. I think that if this were less visible, even in that case, I generally oppose the use of, let's call it, poor, low-level materials of this nature in historic districts. I mean, ephes is something that should be avoided if at all possible, and I think here it should be avoided, especially when it's quite visible. I think that the applicant could look with staff's assistance at how buildings of this style and type did return their facades on alleys or other less visible secondary walls, and seek to explore that either with simple brick would probably be the best, or a brick return with true stucco. I think that the details leave quite a bit to be desired, and I think that I understand that they're trying to work in a spirit of a kind of complementary feeling to the row. I fear that the detailing would leave this building looking like a poor imitation, watered down, washed out version of the row, and the row will only make this building look bad. So I think the applicant should work with staff to enhance the level of detail in the building so that it does not feel undercooked.
Other comments? Yes, Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't disagree with those comments generally, I think, or the testimony. I'll just point out that there's a fine line between ephes and stucco, but not that fine a line always. And stucco is a very common material for this kind of use, but so is a common brick. So perhaps that's the way out. I don't have a problem with the rear going up high. It's easy to get rid of it because there's a double height family room in the back that could be, you said you don't need it, but they're coming here and that's what they want. I don't have a problem with it, partly because it's more or less invisible. Could it be pushed back a little bit? Sure, working with staff, I think that could help it. But it's up, you know, adjacent to a taller building, and I think it transitions. I think that there are comments about the detailing. I think the inspiration is right, but it just needs to be worked out more carefully. You know, the materials are right generally, and I'll point out that there's a discordance between the rendering and the actual elevation. The elevation, I think, indicates that there isn't this problem of the window running into the cornice, but the rendering shows that it does. So certainly that shouldn't happen. And my two final comments are: it seems as if the ground floor is just underdeveloped on the street side, underdeveloped. It needs something more to produce a little bit of distance from the street itself, the sidewalk, the public sidewalk and the front. Something along the lines of what exists already in the rest of the row. And my final comment is, and we can't I don't think we can determine this from the drawings that we have. I think the window proportions in the new building should echo the tripartite or three-window solution at the other end of the row. And it looks to me as if the proportions are quite different, but I would suggest that those windows need to be, there you go. So maybe they're closer than I thought. I didn't see that elevation. In any event, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that needs to be tinkered with a little bit.
How much frontage you have. So okay, but to continue to develop that.
Yeah.
Okay. Other comments? Yes, Chad? Yeah.
Just wondering if adding all that together, is that too much for a staff level
Well,
review?
I think we should ask them to come back and sort of develop their design more fully with these comments. But it's good for us to, they'll continue to work with staff, but I think we want to see what those details are.
I just think it's also important that this building, like I said, this is a row house being interpreted, and a new, rich family of those all over the city. This new building needs to be clearly new, even though it's taking, and it's highly derived. It's very contextual, but it should not attempt, I think, unless you want to go the full way and absolutely replicate, which is permissible, but you've got to do it down to the detail, and I don't think that's what you want to do. So this building needs to clearly let its history be known, that there was a missing tooth, and you filled it in a lot later, 100 years after the original tooth was grown.
Okay. Any other comments? I just want to talk about the penthouse, or I guess it's the 5th floor. Do other commissioners agree that we should try and minimize? Okay. All right. So I think they should look to push it back or relocate the square footage and remove it altogether. And I know, Fred, that you think a little bit differently, but they can explore that and let them come back and show us those changes as well. So we won't take any action today. And we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, the next item is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 19-18175. This is 128 Greenpoint Avenue, located in the Greenpoint Historic District. This is a one-story commercial building. The application is to replace storefront infill and install signage, lighting, and fencing.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ann Jennings, Preservation Staff. This application is for 128 Greenpoint Avenue. It's located on the south side of the street between Manhattan Avenue and Franklin Street in the Greenpoint Historic District. The application is to replace infill at this building, as well as install fencing and a gate, and the applicant is here to discuss the proposal.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Zachary Lewis. I'm the project manager for this project, representing Richard Lewis Architects. So here you can see the original building. It is a building that was there, as you'll see in the next slide, in the 1940s, here on the left. We're not sure when the building was actually physically constructed. We have not been able to find information on that, but here you can see in the designation photo as well, it has basically maintained the same form since the 1940s. Here you see side-by-side images of the existing condition on the left, and on the right, the proposed view. I'll have you note that we are proposing fencing on both sides, a new gate here to protect the fire escape above, as well as a fire corridor that we constructed from inside the restaurant space. New wood doors, new wood cladding under the windows, and a new window in the place of the existing window, as well as new signage lighting, and some facade lighting. Again, just another view closer up. And this is, at the request of the community board, a view from a more oblique angle, just showing how it will present itself on the streetscape. Again, fencing on both sides, movable planters, the gate that we had mentioned earlier. Plan views, the existing conditions on the top, on the bottom, showing the new fence here with a gate at the end, and also at the western edge, sorry. This is a typical floor plan showing how seating will be arranged in the property during the warmer months. About 25 seats out there. And then more specific details on how the front facade will work. So the existing above and proposed down below. The new door with the wood infill, the window with the wood infill below. And then some sections showing the slatted wood fence on all sides. And then the streetscape view from the front. Just more details describing how we propose to assemble the door and windows. I'll note that this door is the fire door and is replicating what is there currently. The new doors have a pivot door with a side light, wood infill, and then the wood infill carries across onto the window as well. These are some additional contextual views showing the existing conditions. And then we also are including neighborhood context photos showing that many of the historic storefronts in the neighborhood are wood. The two buildings adjacent, 132 Greenpoint Avenue, has wood front doors, as well as 126. And then just the lighting that we're proposing, the signage lighting on the left and the decorative lighting on the right. And that is it. So any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? All right, we have one speaker, Patrick Waldo.
Patrick Waldo, Historic Districts Council. Given the recent proposals to demolish smaller buildings in the Greenpoint Historic District, HDC applauds the adaptive reuse of this utilitarian building. The proposed colors, neon signage, and door are all tasteful and welcome improvements which will aid in making this restaurant an attractive destination. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? Okay, Community Board. Sure, yes. Community Board 1 recommends approval of this proposal. Do we have any other questions? Okay, we can close the hearing. Any comments?
I agree with HDC. I think it's a terrific way to activate an otherwise dead building in an historic district, and compared to the alternatives, this is terrific.
So I think it's a significant improvement. And I think they've been, careful in terms of, they've got contemporary sort of introductions, but this building's anyway sort of an anomaly in the district. And it's very, let's hope, limited, so I think it's good. Okay.
Okay, in the matter of docket number 19-18175, 128 Greenpoint Avenue in the Greenpoint Historic District, The application is to replace storefront infill and install signage, lighting, and fencing. I note that the building is not one for which the historic district was designated. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed work will not alter, eliminate, or conceal any significant architectural features of the surrounding buildings or streetscape, that the infill and fences will relate well to the building and site in terms of their materials and size, that except for select views of portions of secondary facades, none of the neighboring buildings or surrounding streetscape will be obscured from view by the proposed fences, that the limited use of the fences in front of this modern building, which is set back from the property line in conjunction with their rectilinear composition and simple details, will help the installations to remain a harmonious secondary presence within the streetscape, that the metal gate will be simply designed and typical of utilitarian gates found throughout the historic district in terms of its size, material, finish, and amount of transparency, that the signage will be typical in placement and material, moderate in amount, simply designed and well-scaled to the building, that the light fixtures will be small in size and simply designed, and when seen at this simply designed facade, their number will be compatible with their context and will not draw undue attention to the fixtures, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Greenpoint Historic District.
All in favor? Any opposed? This application is approved.
Commissioners, item 3 on the hearing agenda is an application for a certificate of appropriateness of Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 19-19237. This is 208 Adelphi Street, located in the Fort Greene Historic District. This is an Italianate-style row house built in 1866. The application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions.
Good morning, Victor Timonek, Preservation staff. This is 208 Adelphi Street. There's some historic and current photos on the bottom of the screen here. It's located towards the edge on Adelphi Street and Willoughby Street. At the rear facade, the applicant is proposing to raise the rear facade to fit a full height floor at the top, and then also to pull out the extension at the first floor. Both of those will match what has been approved at both 204 and 206. The similar changes were approved at 204 in 2003, and then 206 matched those in 2012. For the 206 application, the commission asked that they pull in the info of the ground floor, so that's pretty similar to what you're seeing at 208. New wood siding, wooden glass infill at the deposit floor. There is partial visibility through side block. Right here, actually. So you will see it from Willoughby Avenue. The top is just being raised a few feet, and then the extension is by 6 feet by 3. The applicant's here if you have any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions? All right, we have no questions. And are there any speakers on this item? No speakers. Community Board 2 recommends approval. That was quick. If we have no other, don't have any other questions, we can close the hearing. All right, comments?
I think there's absolutely nothing controversial going on here. And I just wanted to note that it is a terrifically cute little house. And I'm happy that they're maintaining it as is.
The whole row is just lovely, and it's great. You're just going to fit in perfectly.
Okay. It definitely matches the rear of other buildings and maintains its connection to the road. Okay, Anne?
In the matter of 208 Adelphi Street, an Italianate-style row house built in 1866, the application is to construct a rooftop and rear yard addition. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Fort Greene Historic District. Further note that at the adjacent building at 206 Adelphi Street, a certificate of appropriateness was issued in 2012 for the construction of a new rear yard addition to match the depth of the adjacent neighbor and raising the height of the rear facade and roof line. I recommend approval, finding that the demolition of the existing rear yard extension will not cause damage to or the removal of any significant historic material, that the proposed work will be only partially visible through an opening in the street wall over the rear yard fence of an adjacent property along Willoughby Avenue. That the adjacent sister buildings at 204 and 206 Adelphi Street have already had their rear facades and roof line altered in a similar fashion, and the proposed work will align with their rear facades and additions. That the proposed design and materials of the altered rear facade and enlarged rear yard addition, including clapboard siding, wood windows, a wood cornice, and metal door and window assembly, will be consistent with the historic composition and materials of buildings of this type and style. That the modest projection of the proposed addition into the rear yard will not diminish a cohesive central green space, and that the proposed addition will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or of the Fort Greene Historic District.
All in favor? Any opposed? Application is approved.
Commissioners, the next item is an application for a certificate of appropriateness of Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 19-18701. This is 452 9th Street, located in the Park Slope Historic District Extension. This is a neo-Gothic-style row house designed by Jefferson F. Wood and built in 1883-84. The application is to install a barrier-free access ramp.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Shabrami of the Preservation Staff. The application before you at 452 9th Avenue is located between 7th and 8th Avenues in the Park Slope Historic District Extension. The application is to modify an areaway for barrier-free access for basement entrance by carefully removing bluestone pavers, removing the modern metal gate, and demolishing 3 brownstone steps, ramping up the new walkway, and reinstalling the salvageable bluestone. The Semino architects are here if there are any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Yes,
I
Diana.
actually have one question
Yes.
for you, Madam Chair. Is this the sort of thing that might, in our new rules, be staff approvable?
Okay, that is something that I have to ask Corey, and he, yes,
Yes,
Attorney
indeed.
Denise? Yes.
This is the type of modification that we would be able to do.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
That was answered, yes. Okay, do we have any questions? All right, we have one speaker, Robert Levine.
Good morning, Chairperson and committee. As owner, I just want to say that the space is needed for my wife, who has had Parkinson's for 30 years. I know that's not a landmark issue per se, but putting it into that row of 11 houses, as far as I'm concerned, as well as Community Board 6, since they voted 32 yes, 0 no's, and 1 abstention, which was mine because I own the house, I'm on the board. That row of 11 houses, which you're looking at now, there's only going to be 2, there's only 3 now, including mine, that have what I would call the original steps on there. Everything else has been changed. And none of those are original because in 1929, when the subway came in and tore up 9th Street from the front of the house to the front of the houses, pretty much every stoop pretty much was taken off, put back. So there's no real original ironwork, there's no original work to most of the fronts of the houses. So we felt that it's fine. It doesn't affect the character of the neighborhood, and thank you very much for looking at it.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? No other speakers. Community Board 6, Brooklyn, recommends approval of this application. So if we have no other questions, we can close the hearing. All right, any concerns? It's very consistent with what's happened the remaining, the rest of the block. And just to answer your sort of the broader question about, this particular thing apparently would be covered by the rules, but the rules do have other aspects about areaways, which we've seen very often about trying to address issues of accessibility and accessibility. So there's several aspects to it, and time, of course, our staff will be briefing you about that as well, the details. Okay, so we can move to decision. Diana, do you want to read that?
In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Brooklyn, LPC 1918-701, 452 9th Street, Park Slope Historic District Extension. Application is to install a barrier-free access ramp. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Park Slope Historic District Extension, and I recommend approval, finding that the ramp will provide barrier-free access without eliminating any significant architectural features, that other houses in this row feature similar alterations within the areaway, and therefore the work will maintain consistency within the row, with the small-scale, simple design and bluestone paving of the ramp will allow it to be well integrated into the areaway without overwhelming or detracting from the significant architectural features of this building, and that the areaway railing is simply designed and consistent with the variety of areaway railings found throughout the streetscape in terms of dimensions, material, design, placement, and finish.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This application's approved. Thank you. We'll break for a very early lunch.
Yeah.
And we'll
Ritual, yeah.
come back at 12:10 or so. Okay, 12:15. That's good. Brunch.
It is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, docket number 19-18587. This is 375 West Broadway, located in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is an Italianate-style store and loft building designed by J.B. Snook and built in 1875-76. The application is to install a rooftop pergola.
Commissioners, I just want to introduce to you one of our new landmark preservationists, Lindsay Decter, and this is her first presentation before the commission.
Additionally, note that a permit
Okay. Are there any questions? Any questions? We have one speaker, Patrick Waldo.
Patrick Waldo, Historic Districts Council. HDC understands that the rendering was not completely correct in the drawings packet, which was available to the public prior to this hearing. From what we were able to see, the proposed trellis appears like an elevated subway line behind the roof of the low-rise building. This building's height makes visibility issues inevitable, and while HDC usually does not have strong feelings about pergolas or trellises, we were unable to determine what is being proposed because there was no rendering of a finished product. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers on this item? Okay, Community Board 2 recommends denial of this application. They say the trellis is without historic reference, is unsuitable to the building and to the neighborhood, and the applicant did not produce a required photograph or mock-up. However, the computer-generated photo montage made clear that the trellis is clearly visible and undesirable intrusion on the roofscapes from a public thoroughfare. All right, do we have any, do you want to respond to the Community Board's comments or testimony?
So, as the gentleman suggested, we have had issues with the rendering, and we could definitely provide a better rendering representation if that's something that wants to be reviewed. As far as historic precedents, rooftops historically weren't really ever used. This is just to provide shade for rooftop use. It's not, there's no real historic precedent anywhere because they were never developed.
Okay. All right, do we have any other questions? We can close the hearing. Okay, comments? I don't see any issue with this, and I understand that there's a testimony, but, and particularly, I don't know if they've had a chance to see this rendering, but there are some other things that are happening at staff level. I think, the bulkhead extending allows this to, in fact, even disappear more, but it's a small view, and really it's just a part of, like, roofscape.
Absolutely right.
It's not close to the building there, you know. The
Right,
building that you see it over, it's way back. You know.
Right, it's like almost, 100 feet deep away from the street, yes.
While I'm hesitant to approve something that we don't really have a clear reference to view, I think it would be good if they would be required to submit one to staff so that staff could then okay this. Is that
Well, the staff has already, the mock-up is accurate.
Okay.
So that, I think, was what was said. The rendering is slightly off, but I think with the MAPA, we have a pretty good sense that what the visibility is. Any concerns about that? Okay, Kim?
In the matter of 375 Broadway, Soho Cast Iron Historic District, application is to install a rooftop pergola. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the construction of the proposed pergola will not alter or eliminate any significant architectural features of the roof of the building, that the pergola will be simply designed, and that the metal material and gray finish of the pergola will be in keeping with finishes of utilitarian rooftop accretions throughout the historic district, that the pergola will only be visible from limited views through a gap in the street wall on Broome Street in the context of other rooftop accretions, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Soho Cast Iron Historic District.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This application's approved.
Commissioners, we're going to just jump over the next item and move to item 7 on the agenda, which is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 19-19280. This is 4 Astor Place, AKA 740 through 744 Broadway, and 436 through 450 Lafayette Street in the NoHo Historic District. This is a Romanesque revival-style loft building designed by Francis H. Kimball and built in 1891. The application is to install signage.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Caroline Passion, Preservation Staff. The subject property is located on the south side of the street between Broadway and Lafayette Street. The applicant is proposing to remove this existing illuminated signage located at the second floor facing Astor Place, and to install new illuminated signage using the same penetrations as much as possible, and extending one bay over to the west. Commissioners, please note that the existing David Barton gym signage was approved by the Commission in 2009, and the applicant, Frederick Becker, is here to discuss this proposal in more detail. So here, go back, go forward, laser pointer. Got it, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Frederick A. Becker. Ms. Passion has basically taken away most of what I had to say. This is, oops, sorry. This is a application to replace an existing permitted sign by moving it slightly over to the right for the 4 bays to the right as opposed to 4 bays in the middle. It was a previously permitted sign. She said we cannot use the same armature, unfortunately, because of the movement, but we are going to use the same penetrations into the existing fabric of the building without creating new penetrations. There was some confusion at the community board, who were of the opinion that illuminated signs were not allowed in a historic district, so they basically disapproved this, and they weren't sure that the David Barton sign had been permitted. We think this is a minor note and request your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. Are there any questions? Okay, are there any speakers on this item? Any speakers? No speakers. Community Board 2 recommends denial because the applicant did not present examples of previously LPC approved signage similar to the proposal, and the sign is not in keeping with the character of NoHo Historic District. Right, and they talk about the illumination. Okay, any other questions? All right, we can close the hearing. Comments?
Okay.
Yeah, they're moving a sign. All right. It's right. And I think because the sign is being illuminated, I think actually if it was exactly the same and sort of moved, it may have been able to be done at staff level, but because the sign is slightly larger in terms of the length by a couple of feet, and that is illuminated, that's come before the commission. So, but with those changes, I don't think it detracts from the building or the district overall. Okay. Michael?
Starting, there we go, 4 Astor Place, also known as 740 to 744 Broadway and 436 to 450 Lafayette Street in the NoHo Historic District. The application is to install signage. I recommend approval, that finding that the existing penetrations will be reused to the extent possible and that the installation of the proposed sign will not cause any damage to any significant architectural or historic feature of the building, that there is historic precedent for large signs on the facades of this building and other commercial buildings in this historic district, that the location of the sign in front of the second floor windows will recall the placement of historic signs which were found on cornices and spandrels throughout the facades of the buildings of this age and type in this historic district, that the design of the signage featuring edge illuminated reverse channel letters painted white attached to matte black aluminum letters mounted on tubular framing will be consistent with the signage previously approved by the Commission on this building, and that the size of the proposed illuminated signage will not overwhelm the facade and will not call undue attention to itself or away from the significant architectural features of the building.
Second, all in favor? Any opposed? Application's approved.
Okay, Commissioner. We're going to move to item 8 on the agenda, which is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 1920244. This is 41 East 70th Street, located in the Upper East Side Historic District. It's a Neo-Georgian-style townhouse designed by Amar Embry II and built in 1928-29. The application is to alter the front facade at the ground floor and to modify fenestration on secondary facades.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Caroline Kennedy from the Preservation Department. The application before you concerns this building at 41 East 70th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. And its location is right in the center of the district. And the proposal is to modify the front facade by removing these transom panels and then making alterations to the side facade and rear facade. The side facade is visible from an alley over here. And so these are the panels that will come out. These are the transom windows that will be installed. And this is the existing side facade. And this is the proposed elevation. There's also a change at the rear. The team is here to go ahead and explain it further.
Okay, thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Sure. Okay, which advance is it? Oh, okay, got it, thank you. Okay. Oh. Okay, hi, thank you all for taking the time to hear our application. My name is John Burson from the firm Sawyer Burson. I'm here with my colleague Thomas Papp, as well as Valerie Campbell from Kramer Levin, Jared Green from Langen, and Jeff Smith from Silman. The property is a townhouse, Neo-Georgian, designed by Amar Embry in 1928, originally from Mr. and Mrs. Walter Rothschild. In 1959, the townhouse was purchased by the 20th Century Fund Foundation and used as a community facility, and the new owner is converting it back to single-family use. What I will do is go through the proposed alterations briefly. It's a parallel presentation of the original 1928 facades that we were able to extrapolate from some very old photos of drawings, as well as from the tax photo. We'll also be showing you the existing structure in elevation and then our proposed alterations. If I can go back to LPC 102, just want to quickly point out that LPC 102 and 103, we did a good deal of research in the neighborhood for some of the alterations we're going to be doing. These are not, we note on 71st Street, kind of mirroring our property, are several townhouses designed by Amar Embry that we looked to for precedent. We also looked around the neighborhood, and I will be referring back to these in a minute. So the south elevation, which is the street facade, what we're proposing to do is add a window. Well, this is the existing one by Embry, which had metal grill work in front of the existing windows, and then wood fan lights where transoms might have been. There was a wrought iron balcony, and up above, set back from the street, is a 6th floor clad in stucco, and much of the original detailing remains, including this railing here at the 6th floor. This is the existing condition now. The balcony has been removed. The metal work has been removed. The front door is clearly not the original, nor do we think that this light, this transom light is. And what we are proposing to do is the following. We would like to put a new wood panel door at the service entrance. We'd like to add a window in a combined light well at the cellar level precedents for panel doors and came up with what we think is an understated traditional panel door that is reflective of the overall vocabulary of the house. At the street level, we are proposing opening up the fan lights, removing the wood, and putting in glass transoms. We did take a look at some of the conditions, again, around the neighborhood, on 70th Street as well as 71st Street. We know this is over the front door, but here are flanking ones. We feel that this is possibly something that might have been intended early on in the design of the building originally, because when the interior was stripped out, renovations from since 1959, we found that there were masonry vaults built over these apertures, and that the wood infill is actually fairly thin. It doesn't even look like there is stud work behind them. They almost look like an afterthought. So we propose a segmented architrave over a very simple transom light that would carry up and add continuity to the tripartite nature of the double hung windows. Here you can see the existing windows with alarm tape in them. They may well be the original single glazed units. In addition, from an aesthetic standpoint, we feel that the units with the wooden fan lights appear somewhat diminutive with regard in proportion both to the neighbors and to the rest of the facade, because they are actually either the same size or somewhat smaller than the secondary fenestration above. In addition, at the rear of the building, the fan lights are open. They're glazed. Up above, on the 6th floor, we are proposing removing the stucco, which was re-stuccoed, we think, sometime in the 70s, because we found a CMU backer wall there, which clearly was not original. We'd like to put a running bond of limestone slabs with a limestone cornice. And then also up above, you'll see we're adding a bulkhead, extending the chimneys, and adding a clear story in the back. The only things visible, if you saw the mock-up photos, are the two chimneys, which are visible, one because this one's original, also because they've been extended up 3 feet per code. And we are proposing all these units would be mahogany units with minimal muntins and sticking. We're looking to use Riley, who has great familiarity with landmark quality work, as well as for these double hung units down below. So here again, the fan lights. The original west elevation in the alley facing the Madison Avenue neighbor has a haphazard pattern of windows that corresponded to bathrooms and service and the like. There was a total of, I think, 17 units. Many of them were bricked over. The total of active units was 12. Some were added. Others were bricked over. And what we are proposing on this facade, in addition, one thing I should point out is up at the 6th floor, there was originally a setback to this facade with an iron railing. Sometime between 1959 and today, this area was enclosed with a fairly prosaic running bond brick. And what we are looking to do up above there is replace it with a dark bronze system by Horace Bronze with a bronze cornice. We think it harkens back at least to the openness of that original zone of this facade, if not actually literally being an open facade. Up above, you can see the clear story we'd like to add. Here is the bulkhead. Again, no visibility from 70th Street. And then the bricked openings, we would like to basically re-brick entirely so they disappear. neighbors across the alley. We'd like to add 2 new units with clear glazing to match the street level units with the fan lights above that we are proposing to have glazed. These would have glazed fan lights as well. And then we still have some of the existing windows. All the new units would have the limestone sill that was installed when these 2 windows were installed at some earlier date. Facing the rear yard, the original building had simple balcony, actually really a landing, and then 3 units with glazed lights below. The only significant alteration to this over the years was up at the 6th floor where this setback stucco facade was replaced when this was enclosed. Again, this is the running bond, the brick, and then 3 very standard windows. Down below, the multi-light glazing was replaced. You can see there's still the alarm tape in the windows. What we are proposing here is extending the flanking units down to the floor to match the center unit. We don't know why Embry didn't do that originally, but we think it's a fairly nominal modification. We'd like to extend the light well the full width of the facade, extend the landing out to make a balcony, replace the new glazing and the fan lights, but with a grid pattern. And then up above is the continuation of that unit I discussed on the side of the building. Here it is again, with the clear story above and the railing as required per code. And then for further elucidation, here's the original landing. Here is the balcony that we are proposing with the stairs here. We would like to use glass for the paving of the balcony to let light down into the continuous light well below.
I just have a quick question for you about that. Yeah. Why did you choose to do the nets in the way you did? It's a grid.
You know, it was, we wanted to do a somewhat more subdued aesthetic here. And so we used this grid pattern to carry it up and a little just distinguish it a little bit from what was in the front. And we weren't quite sure how to incorporate that original pattern. This original more radial pattern. Yep. And then finally, we are proposing an excavation. The original building had a cellar. There are the original setback terraces on the 6th floor. Here is the one that was closed sometime after 1959. And then here's what we're proposing. A cellar excavated directly under the footprint of the house. It's 11 feet from the original cellar slab down to the top of this slab. There's a hydrostatic slab and a topping slab. Up above here is that bronze glazing we'd like to add, the clear story, the bulkhead, again, a sight line from 70th Street, and then the balcony that we're proposing to add that. I might have omitted that in the discussion of the street facade. I apologize for that. We would like to put back the balcony, and we went to 71st Street and found one of those Amor Embry townhouses, a very good precedent that we could use for the restoration of this balcony. With that, the rest is plans and details. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, and the team as well is available.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions? All right, are there any speakers on this item? Any speakers? Okay, there are no speakers. And let me just see if we received anything from the community board. And we received from the community board their recommendation of approval. All right, so if we have no other questions, we can close the hearing. Comments? Yes, Kim?
I think it's a very, it actually addresses a lot of the issues that were maybe needing maintenance and change, and I think it's a wonderful restoration. So I think it's appropriate.
Yes.
I agree. I'm interested to see the original drawings as well, the plan layouts, although they don't come into our purview. I'm glad to see that the meager little rooms that the Rothschilds were able to live in are really being finally now improved, so that today's occupants can be happy.
Okay. So with that, Michael? Thank you.
No matter at 41 East 70th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District, an application to alter the front facade on the ground floor and to modify fenestration on secondary facades. I recommend approval, finding that the existing wood window panels are an atypical feature of houses of this age and style, and that their removal and replacement with arched transom windows will not diminish the special character of the building and will be consistent with other buildings in the streetscape. That the proposed arched transoms will be installed in existing masonry openings and are in keeping with the federal style of the building in terms of materials, design, finish, and dimensions, and will harmonize with the existing fenestration on the primary facade. That the removal of brick infill at the secondary facades will not eliminate any significant historic or architectural features of the building. That the existing secondary west facade already has an irregular pattern of new historic and bricked-in windows, and the proposed windows at the secondary facades will only be visible at oblique angles from the public thoroughfare and are in keeping with the irregular fenestration that has evolved on this building over time. That the rear of the penthouse is a later addition to the building, therefore the installation of multi-laid bronze windows will not replace any significant historic fabric. That the design, materials, and details of the bronze penthouse windows relates well to the building. That the new and enlarged chimney at the front facade will be consistent with historic chimneys in terms of materials, bond pattern, color, and design, and will not call undue attention to itself. That the proposed enlargement of the arch windows at the rear facade by dropping the sills to create French doors will not remove significant historic fabric. Like the excavation below the building for a new subcellar floor will be developed in compliance with DOB rules and regulations and under the supervision of a professional engineer, and the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District.
All in favor? Any opposed? Application's approved.
Okay, Commissioners, yes, we have one more item, and we're moving back to item 6. It's an application for a certificate of appropriateness of the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 1909479. This is 90 Grove Street, located in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a federal-style house built in 1827 and remodeled by Carrere and Hastings in 1893. The application is to legalize the removal of a cornice and paint from the facade without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits.
I would sit over there.
She doesn't have anything. No, he doesn't.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Katie Rice, Landmark staff. 90 Grove Street is located between West 4th and Waverly Place in the Greenwich Village Historic District. The proposal is to legalize the removal of cornice elements and paint from the facade. The building was originally constructed in the federal style in 1827, matching its neighbor at 88 Grove Street. In 1893, the owner of the building, a painter named Robert Blum, hired Carrere and Hastings to alter the front facade, adding studio windows. In addition, the facade was painted and sections of the cornice were modified. In 1900, a publication noted the facade was painted a pale yellow color, but appears to be white in later photos. This is the 1940s tax photograph, our designation photograph, and this is the current condition. And the proposal is to legalize the removal of the paint and the cornice elements seen on either side of the studio window here. The applicant is here to present.
Katya and Howard Reed, we are the owners of 90 Grove Street and reside there since 1996. We are asking the Commission today to rescind the violation regarding the removal of a section of cornice molding which occurred during the restoration of the facade of 90 Grove Street that took place in 1997. In 1996, we purchased 88 and 90 Grove Street in partnership with another family from the St. Vincent's Hospital Corporation. The hospital inherited these houses from Lettice Phelps Stokes, whose family had been in residence there for more than 80 years. In her later years, Mrs. Phelps Stokes was unable to maintain the buildings, and when we arrived, they were both in very poor condition. With our architect and masonry contractor, who was recommended to us by the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, we began restoration of the facade of our building. By way of background, this federal-style house was built in 1827, and in this photograph, which dates from 1891, we can see the original facade with 3 windows, 2 dormers, and a cornice molding which extended the width of the building. Here the molding aligns to a similar detail on the adjoining facade of 88 Grove Street. In 1893, number 90 was sold to Robert Blum, an artist who commissioned a renovation that completely altered the facade of the house. The entrance floor remained in the pure federal style of the 1827 design. The upper floor was transformed into a large studio, 2 stories in height, by adding a low brick parapet to the brick facade wall on either side of the 2 large glass windows, almost creating a storefront effect with glazed double wooden doors and a wrought iron railing inset. A large skylight was installed in the pitched roof, which had previously contained 2 dormers. Number 4. A large and small section of cornice molding were installed in that renovation, which also served the function of diverting rainwater to copper leaders attached to the building's facade. Number 5. Sometime between 1900 and 1969, when this LPC designation photograph was taken, the copper leaders were removed and the plumbing system was relocated to the inside of the house. House had a history of leaks from the facade, and when we started, there was evidence of mold on the interior plaster walls behind the front of the building. These 2 sections of molding were badly deteriorated. The mason removed them and the thick layers of cracked and checking paint, which was trapping moisture in the bricks and ultimately inside the house. Loose mortar was removed and the facade was repointed, and various bricks were replaced with a similar antique matching brick. We replaced all of the double-hung windows, including the large studio glass window, and all of the copper and glass skylight elements which had been tarred over. With our contractor and architect, we were very careful to upgrade all aspects of the facade in keeping with the history of the building and the context of our neighbors with similar buildings in the West Village. Our restoration included the replacement of a non-functioning front door, doorbell, mail slot, sconces, wrought iron railing, and gate, rebuilding of the stoop, and all related elements constructed of brownstone. Respectfully, it is our position that in 1996, the facade and the entire house was in very poor condition and had been compromised over many years of neglect, with inferior replacements and little or no maintenance with regard to the house's history. Our goal was to restore the facade as closely as possible to the 1893 renovation without altering the interior plumbing of the roof drainage system. The violations relating to the replaced front door and to the entrance sconces have been rescinded, as it was determined by the LPC that the current installation conforms to historical standards. Kevin Murphy, in his recent book, The Houses of Greenwich Village, published by Abrams in 2000, and 8 features a restored 90 Grove Street and states that, quote, "With recent renovations, the artistic vision of Robert Blum is still intact." In our restoration of the facade, we were relying on the advice of professionals and assumed that all guidelines to the LPC permit were met. And to our surprise, we received this notice of violation from LPC some 20 years after the facade renovation. Under these special circumstances, and given our steadfast appreciation of preservation and architectural history relating to this building, we would like to request an on-site inspection of the facade with a member of this commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions? All right, we have a few people who want to testify. Sarah B. Naplin?
Sarah B. Natman of the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation. GVSHP knows the owners of 90 Grove Street to be conscientious homeowners who have lovingly and meticulously cared for this historic home over 2 decades. Once largely empty and abandoned, they have brought it back to life and been incredible stewards of this property ever since. We understand that the owners relied upon the advice of professionals who told them that all restoration work was being undertaken when they purchased the properties, had received the appropriate and necessary approvals from the LPC. We can imagine their surprise to discover more than 2 decades after the fact that some of this work did not go through the appropriate process and receive the necessary approvals. Normally, we view after the fact legalizations with considerable skepticism, as we think the Commission generally should. It's important that applicants are discouraged from simply making changes they deem appropriate and seeking approvals for it at a later date if needed. We believe here that this is far from the case, and that most of the work done is eminently worthy of approval, given the means by which these owners discovered the lack of appropriate permits for this work performed long ago, and their clear interest in maintaining and preserving the historic qualities of their property. We believe that seeking to get around necessary approvals was the last thing they were seeking to do. Much of the restoration work at 90 Grove Street was sensitively done, showcasing the original federal details and the elements of the 1893 Carrera and Hastings renovation. We believe that the removal of the paint and restoration of the brick was sensitively done and warrants approval. The removal of the abbreviated cornice, however, is harder to justify. While we think the house shines beautifully today as is, the removal of this element is a loss to the facade, and the history of the building, and not likely one the Commission would have approved at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Patrick Waldo.
Patrick Waldo, Historic Districts Council. Carrera and Hastings' radical alteration of this federal row house chose to retain portions of the dentiled cornice, and this design choice worked quite well. A composition isn't complete until all of its parts are in the right places, which is why the broken cornice should be returned as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? Community Board 2 recommends approval of the paint removal from the facade and denial of the legalization of the removal of portion of the cornice that was removed after designation, and that it should be restored to the condition at designation. All right, do we have any other questions for the applicant? Yes.
I guess I can't hurt to ask.
Yes, sure.
Given testimony and what the obvious, is there an objection to the cornice down? And if so, what's the substance of it?
Yes, if you, so the question is about the bringing back or recreating those, the cornice and putting it back on the building.
It seems that there were this one small piece of the cornice to the right of the large studio window and a larger piece to the left, and there were these copper roof leaders attached to them. So the function that it served to divert water from the roof is no longer, they no longer serve that function. The other thing is that about 2 feet of brick was added to the building, which we can see if we go back to the slide from 1890. In other words, the tops of these 2 buildings used to, we have to go back further. There we are. The tops of the 2 buildings used to align, and at that point it made sense to have this cornice molding at the top of the building. When the skylight was put in over the studio, 2 feet of brick was added to the building. So 88 and 90 no longer were the same height, as you can see in that photograph. The cornice molding looks like it looks like a mustache here. It looks like something that was added to the building that doesn't fit, or it should have been at the top of the building, like the molding next to it in 88 is at the top of that building. So we didn't know any of this when we started, but now having lived in the building and seen the renovation that was done then for the 20 years that have passed, it doesn't seem to make any sense to go back. I would request, I've asked this before, and I don't know if it's possible to have a member of the commission look at the building on site instead of in photographs. Is anything like that ever possible with LPC? I don't know.
Sometimes the commissioners do go and make site visits.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can close the hearing. Okay. Comments? Yep.
I don't have to make a site visit to know that the changes in, is that 90, number 90, I think, were significant enough. I would have imagined that that cornice was even probably removed in order to achieve the additional brick, and then just kind of pasted back on as an ornament. I'm comfortable with the fact that this building has been so altered over time that its telling of history can remain without that strange mustache, and I'm prepared to approve it as presented.
Okay. Other comments? Yes.
As a possessor of a mustache, I think mustaches are sometimes appropriate. And I think that had the modifications been of a random or builder nature, I'd have less qualms about letting them go than the fact that they were part of a concerted design by a significant New York City architect. So I would say they were, if they were a mustache, they were an intentionally created, well-waxed and curled mustache by a noted mustache possessor, Mr. Carrera or Hastings. So I think that given that it no longer is a required waterproofing item, and if, as presented, it was probably the deficient waterproofing that condemned it in the first place, the heat's off the cornice. It's just a decorative item. I think it would be appropriate to restore a Carrera and Hastings design feature.
Okay. Other comments? Yes.
Yeah, I kind of also feel that it looks a little unfinished without the cornice. I think that everything else that's been done is totally approvable. I don't have any problems with,
the paint
what was done at the time, but I think it would improve the look of the building too.
I think I'm in Fred camp, which is, I guess we could take the leap of faith that Carrera and Hastings did that intentionally. It was an important part of the design, although at first blush, I would sort of, it looked like it looked kind of like a remnant of something, and is everything deliberate, and is everything absolutely important to the design? It's just a question. It's been 20 years. The feature is gone. It'll be a reproduction, and it'll be put back. And I think if we can accept taking the brick back to what it was historically as exposed, I'm not sure it's absolutely necessary to bring that back. Yes.
Well, my first instinct is to recommend that we put back the cornice, but I think that to go back to the Carrera and Hastings, it would need to have the painted finish as well. I think the entire composition was what was important to that design, and I think if we're going to accept the stripped brick, then I think adding the cornice is just adding one little piece back that is sort of random. So I think I can accept the history that the house has taken in these 20 years.
Other comments? Yes, ma'am.
I fall in the other camp. I think a Carrera and Hastings touch on this building is an important one, and it's important to understanding the history of the house, and I think it should be put back.
Okay. Others? Yes, please.
I agree that it doesn't.
Yes, Kim.
I agree that it doesn't need to go back, because it's such a short little piece on one side and barely anything on the other side.
Okay, let me just, yes, John, you want to come?
As you might imagine, I'm in the mustache camp.
Okay, well, okay, let me just say, this is a comment to the commission overall, which is, we can say I'm in this cab and that cab, we can sort of split the vote. I think for us, we have to sort of think, you know, where do we want to go with this, and whether there's a different way of thinking about it to sort of resolve the issue, because now we're kind of falling on two different sides. So, nobody wants to sort of relent on this issue. So, just asking the question. I think there's an argument to have allowing that. So there seems to be three options here. One is, and the third option is, may not be really on the table, but one is that approve as is, and the second is approve but require them to put this back, right? The cornice, reproduce that cornice and put it back. The third is, of course, you know, do the paint as well, but I think most of the commissioners, you know, we're okay with that. I won't, you know, if all the commissioners wanted to put back, that's fine, and we can recommend that they do that, but,
Seems like 5 of us don't.
5 of us don't, right? Yes, John?
Who is the fourth? The 3 of us and who?
It's just the facial hair.
So there's only 3 of us.
We had 6?
There's only me,
Oh, I
Michael,
thought so.
and
I thought somebody was
Me,
conflicted
Michael, and
here.
Michael.
I thought, well, no, I think Diana, I wasn't sure which way you were going on this.
I'm sorry?
Sorry. So do we, okay, let me just see again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I felt
Yes.
that I feel that it looks unfinished, that it needs something.
Right, so Diana was kind of like,
Sort of on the corner side, yes, at this point.
right, so,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1. This is what, 2, this is 4.
right, it is unusual, and other commissioners want to reconsider. Okay, well, in that case,
Don't have votes.
I think the commissioners who don't feel it's necessary will probably go ahead with supporting this with the inclusion of the corners, right? It's not necessary, but it's perhaps not inappropriate to put it back. Okay. We will have enough votes if the commissioners who don't think it's necessary to put the cornice back accept the fact that the commission can recommend that. So it's not either or, it seems like four commissioners will definitely not support this project unless the cornice is put back. The 5 who would support it even without the cornice, those 5, or some of those 5, may be able to support it with the cornice being put back. Okay, so,
Just to complicate
yes, complicate it further. Don't
Another-
complicate it that much,
Well,
but
there's
okay.
commissioners who aren't here.
Who knows?
Yes, we can bring this back,
Right.
that is
We
true.
might get to,
That is fine, and because that's a fair comment, and so
That is true.
we don't have to take action today. That's fine, and they can make the argument to the other 2 commissioners. Let me just see what Bernadette saying. Is that what you, yes, Bernadette, is that? Okay, all right, that seems fine.
Well, maybe they wanted to leave it, leave with the cornice back.
They want to, okay, all right. Okay, thank you. That ends today's session.